when we say the word Nihang, what does that mean? And the second question is about the origin of the Nihang Sikhs.
Okay.
Um,
Okay, so the word Nihang, you can take it from two different traditions. There's a Persian text called the Shahnama. And in there, the word Nihang literally means a crocodile. And a crocodile is described as being reckless. So when you have a warrior who's reckless, like he doesn't care for his own life or whatever, he just charges into battle, that's a Nihang. Like. But from the other side of the coin, we have the word Nihang mean Hangana Rehat, meaning without desires. One who's not enamored by Maya and so on. So these traditions, like, so you realize Punjab itself, over the centuries, being close to Persia, next door, like, so if you take not just modern day Punjab, but Pakistan side Punjab, and you take the original Punjab before the British divided, we got divided, the Persians are next door, like, and even genetically, northern India, we are linked, and culturally, and throughout the centuries, sometimes the Persians had influence over Punjab, sometimes the Indians here had Persians over that way, so there's a lot of interaction, so that is there, so both sides are there. So Nihang can mean a pen, it can mean even a lion, it can mean all this. So the origins of the Nihangs, okay, so let's go into the origins of, in 1606, as Guru Arjan Dev was martyred. Now Guru Arjan Dev had foreseen troubled times, and even before Arjan Dev, a lot of Sikhs don't say this, and from a Nihang Sanatan perspective, Guru Nanak was not just a peaceful preacher and stuff. We see Guru Nanak as a warrior as well. Like the traditions of Guru Nanak, keeping a spear. There's a temple, Gurdwara in Bangladesh, called Barsha Sahib, which is being recorded by Gyani Gyan Singh, a historian, and so on. So whether it exists now or not, we can't say. But where Guru Nanak left his Barsha, his spear. In writing of Sui Prakash and such, there's reference of, speaking of Chadde Ghat, is a particular martial techniques, neck breaking techniques, and so on that Guru Nanak and Bhai Madadna are talking about.
neck breaking techniques.
Yeah, that's what Shaturday is all about, neck breaking and head chopping. And then we have it for others, like in Patna today, there's a sword there and a chakra there, which are said to be belonging to Guru Nanak and so on. So Guru Nanak was not just a pacifist. So when you hear things like Guru Gobind Singh and he asked for 5 heads and all this and then created the Khalsa, his inspiration is Guru Nanak. Jyot prem khilne ko chao, says Guru Nanak. He who desires to play the game of love, let him present his head on his palm and then do not step back. Do not hesitate. And so Guru Nanak is the inspiration. So Guru Nanak nowadays is usually presented by Santa Babas because they want to present it in their own image. Little portly guy, peaceful guy. Not so. Guru Nanak traveled the world. He traveled from up to Mecca, all over India. And to travel in those days, you're talking about on foot, going through jungles, climbing mountains. And many times nowadays we've got police and protection on those pathways. There were bandits and so on. So Guru Nanak traveled with his companions, and he would have been minimum armed with what we call asa. Asa is like a stick like this. The stick of Guru Nanak and asa is still found in Hajur Sahib.
In where?
Hajur Sahib, Nandir.
Okay.
In the temple there. So Guru Nanak was armed as well. Like there's a very famous Sakhi of Guru Nanak that day when he went to Kurukshetra. And in Kurukshetra, they were having a clips. And at that time, a Rajput prince came and he presented a hunted kill, a deer to Guru Nanak. And Guru Nanak cooked it. So these are mentioned in ancient texts. And as he's cooked it, of course, the locals there, the Brahmins and so on, they thought it was an auspicious day. You shouldn't not cook meat and so on. But you can realize Guru Nanak was a Kshatriya. So he cooked the meat. And of course, there's a dialogue in the Guru Granth Sahib where the Pandits question him and so on. At the end, he persuaded the Pandits that this is Mahaprasad, meaning Mas kar muh chade gyan tya na jane. Is to argue that this is meat, this is vegetation, and say there's no life in this, there's life in this, blah blah. It's nonsense. It's murkha chagda. So we should go beyond just diet, like and so on. Diet is not the spiritual. It's a little thing, and so on. So Guru Nanak was a Kshatriya. Guru Nanak he attained his Shatrangi Vidya from Nathas, Natha yogis, and so on. This Vidya he passed through on Baba Buddhaji, who had joined him when he was young. From Buddhaji, he came to, so in terms of Guru Arjan Dev asked Baba Buddhaji to pass this knowledge of Shatrangi Vidya. Now, Shatrangi Vidya, you can realize this. So, Shatra Vidya literally means the science of weapons. To be more specific, it is because Shatra Vidya, science of weapons could be anything, it could be Japanese weapons or Chinese, whatever, but they then refer to as Sanatan. Sadiv Dharma Kshatriyanko Chalyo Sanatan Ai. So the eternal Dharma of the Kshatriyas comes from the Sanatan times. And so they can trace it back all the way to Adideva Shiva. Then through them, through Adideva Shiva, it came down to what we call the Virte or the Pachipatocation. These are particular ascetics. And the Virte were ascetics who traveled all over India. They mentioned the Vedas. And some of them were Shatatari. That means they adorned weapons, they're warriors, etc. and so on. And they also known as Pashupats. Shiv Shiv Uchita Rachite Pashupat Shumke Rang Rachite. So these Pashupats were devotees of Shiva. And they were devotees of Shambhu and so on. Shatranaki Vidya, as we understand it, is all from Shiva like. And when you first start, it's all about Bhairav. Bandhata Sri Kal Bhairav Mahapaya Rudra Pairav Jagta Guru. So Bhairav is the Guru of the world. So when they say Bandhate, salutations, Bandhate Sri Kal Bhairav, the horrific form of death. Mahabhay, the great terror that is. Rudra Bhairav. Rudra means here primal fear. There's no one in the world, no human, no living creature who does not reflect on death. So death is the first Guru. Hence, Bhairav becomes Jagta Guru. So this tradition coming down from the Pashupats, then through the Kapaliks. Kapaliks are the Kapratar Babis. Nowadays, you see Agoris. There's sort of a remnant of them, not direct lineage. So the Kapratar Babbe, they eat in the skulls and so on, and they have all these esoteric traditions and so on. And there's even a tradition that they originally were hostile to the Aryans that came in. So they're non-Aryan. And thus they would sacrifice Brahmins and thus eat out of their skulls like. And thus, for many centuries they were hostile, but eventually they got reconciled. And there's a myth related with this, how they reconciled them as well. Like. But anyhow, as the Kapaliks then transmuted in time to Nathas. So you have Gorakhnath, Mashindranath, Gorakhnath, Natha tradition, and so on. And all those eating from skull and all this, those things was left behind in history and so on. So a lot of the horrific stuff we have in the psychological stuff we have in Shatravidya is traced to the Kapalik or Kapalish and so on. And then we get to the Nathas. And Guru Nanak, as a young man, studied with the Nathas. So in the old days, it was common practice in India for sadhus to come and teach in the villages, or people to approach sadhus, etc. And Punjab being a northwest front, and there, a lot of is a violent place. So it's common for people to have some knowledge of defending themselves, protecting themselves, and so on. So in this tradition, Guru Nanak attains that knowledge. But there's two stories like here. Let me tell you this. One is more historical, and one is a sop to the Sikhs. You understand the word sop? Just to win them over like. So in the early 1900s, because modern day Sikhs have the idea Guru Nanak is a guru, Satguru. He doesn't need to be instructed by anybody. That mentality. So the history texts, we have mentioned this, and the Kapaliks and the Pashupats are mentioned in Sablo Granth, a text which Nihangs have. So Nihangs have, so you heard the Guru Granth Sahib. So in the Gurdwaras, you have Guru Granth Sahib. So that is the Guru, like amongst the Sikhs, that is the Guru. Same for the Nihangs, that is the Guru. But in the Nihangs, we have two accompanying texts. We have the Dasam Granth, which you might have heard of as well. But there's another one known as Sablo Granth. Both of those are Guru Gobind Singh's writing. So in the Nihangs, we still have the three Granths. One time, you would have the Adi Granth in the Golden Temple. In the Akal Takht, you have the Dasam Granth. Behind the Akal Takht, you had a mausoleum of Baba Gurbakh Singh, a famous martyr. And in there would be Sablo Granth. So on. But I'll go back to this later on, what happened when the British Raj came. So these Granths are still acknowledged in the Nihang world. And so they paint a different picture altogether when they're combined and so on.
And do you think that modern day Indians don't even know about this enough?
Sikhs don't even know about it.
Sikhs all
Sikhs
over the
don't know.
world.
Sikhs all over the world. With the coming of the British, they got educated in British institutions. And what we have is Sikhism got revised. Okay, it got basically revised. And their clarion was simple, like anything Hindu, it's not Sikh. Only last year, they had a whole thing about getting rid of the saffron color flags and so on, which are traditional. They say it's too Hindu. We want to change the different color and so on. They want to get rid of Diwali, which all Sikhs practice, is mentioned in the text of Paigadas and so on. So this whole idea, like we're not Hindus, humne Hindu, humne Hindu, humne. The old texts are different. So historical texts are different. So even texts from the RAAZ Granth, so they'll quote things from RAAZ Granth, ke na hum Hindu, na Musliman, but the context of that is different. That context is Kabir talking about Hindus and Muslims, and he's saying that the Hindus and Muslims who are arguing over religion, I'm a Bhakt who's risen above it. Because also we have writings of Bulleh Shah. Bulleh Shah was a Sufi Muslim. So Bulleh Shah comes from the philosophy of Wadahat al-Wujud, which literally means all the world is Allah, the world, the universe is the essence of Allah. So this is sort of a compromise of Islam with Indian philosophy. So in India we have Vedanta. And from a Sanatan perspective, the framework of understanding Guru Granth Sahib is Vedanta from a Vaishnava perspective. That's why, so you have Vedanta, Sab Gobind hai, Gobind koi na koi. So Vedanta is there. Then all the Bhakts, most of the Bhakts in Guru Granth Sahib are all from the Ramanandi Vaishnava Sampada. And the Ramanandi Sampada to this day is the largest Hindu Sampada. By far, like there's about 400 million of them and so on.